Hello, my name is Dr. George Mochocki, and welcome to Chapter 2, Basic Economic Theory. And in this chapter, as I mentioned in earlier chapters, this is a chapter part of understanding how a business operates in the Introduction to Business course you're taking me either in a face-to-face class or an online class. So what I'm going to do here in 20 minutes is give you an overview of various economic systems, various founding fathers of economic systems, just so you get this high level understanding of economics. Okay? So the first thing is, what is economics? If I look at economics as how do I manage my resources? And it's like a government or a country. How do they manage their resources, and how does a business manage resources? And we talked earlier in chapter 1 about the factors of production. You got land, you've got knowledge, you got employees, you got people, you've got education. You know what I mean? And that'll tie in with the knowledge portion. So how do I manage these resources? So so when I'm looking at managing resources, basic information is you have two types of systems: a macro, which looks at nations at a larger pictures, and then you have micro. And if I look at the micro, concentrates on behavior of people and organization. So when you're looking at economics, you're looking how a business, small, medium, or large, utilizes its economic resources. Are they efficient and are they effective? Now, the second thing that you have to look at when you're looking at managing resources is you have to look at the economic conditions of the geographic area or the towns that you will be working at. And that's the information you're going to be doing when you're going to be doing your feasibility study. If I'm opening up a Mercedes Benz dealer, I'll either open up in the Lake Forest area or the Barrington area, because if I look at the economic condition within that geographic area, the people have the additional capital to buy that type of that high-end car. But if I would look at Waukegan and maybe some areas of Mount Prospects or Wheeling, they're still at a good standard, but not at the higher level economic conditions. So a business, when you're doing your research, you have to not only look at the overall national economic condition, but also the micro economic condition where you can be opening up your business. Okay? Now, you have two founding fathers. You have the dismal science, and that's Thomas Malthus. And he basically believed that if the rich controlled most of the money, and here, let me just go on here real quickly, believed that if the rich had most of the wealth, the poor had most of the population, resources would run out. So what he would call the dismal science. If there are too many people in the world and believe the answer is radical birth control. And you see this kind of concept and this mentality in the old communist Chinese government. Before China became more of a global player, it relied strictly on its own resources. It didn't go out and outside its boundaries. So I've got 1 billion+ individuals growing, and I only have so much natural resources. Some of it's renewable, but majority, let's say, is not renewable. So how do I contain this to make sure that the population is fed and at least meets the quality of life and some sort of standard of living that we talk about in chapter 1? So they instituted a one-child poor family policy. It's not that if you had 2 or 3 children, because in the more of the rural areas they would have 4, 5, 6 children. It wasn't that they would kill the child. It was just that the state or the Chinese government would not support or wouldn't. You wouldn't have any benefits. They wouldn't give you any kind of you could have the schooling and everything else. So there was no support for the child. But what happened with the one-child policy was that a lot of in the urban areas, since I only could have one child, I would most likely want a male, because that would carry on the family name or heritage going forward. So if the first child was a girl, they would either have abortion or something else. It came out of girl, or it wouldn't be the government, but it would be a midwife for whatever reason would terminate the pregnancy. What happens now is that there's a shortage of women in China. So you have more men than women. You need women, for lack of better, you need women to keep the population going. But China is growing. But now that China is a global economy, they don't have to be relying just on their own borders or own resources. They could take resources from other countries that are willing to sell to them. If you look at Japan, Japan has very few natural resources. They import everything because they're a global player. So that's what what do you call it? Thomas Mathis, and it's just an example of how the dismal science comes out. Now, Adam Smith is the father of economics, for lack of better words, the capitalistic system. His whole theory looked at the factors of production, also looked at that as a business owner, as long as I could keep profits, I could make up my, I'm not taxed too much. I have the freedom to build. I have the freedom to own property. I have the freedom to make whatever products I want. I still pay my taxes, but I basically am in control. No intervention, except like the government may have some kind of restrictions, safety standards, but no major intervention from the government and how I run the business and the profitability. So I can make as much as I want. If I want to work hard, I could do it. So the invisible hand theory, how this works from the capitalistic system. I am a business person. Let's say I don't like people, but I'm a shrewd business person. So I know what customers want. And since I know what customers want, and customers buy my products. And since they're buying my products, I need to make more products. And as I make more products, I need to hire more people. And when I hire more people, I'm paying them to buy more, paying them money, and they can buy products from me, or they can buy products from other vendors or other suppliers. And that's how the invisible hand works. Because indirectly, I'm helping the economy grow. I grow. So when I look at the invisible hand, as long as I have the profit, I have the ability to keep the money, and I'm being successful. As I grow, the economy grows. So that's the free market system. And if you look at the different systems, the communist system, the Chinese, the communist system, I'm going to use China, for example, because they are one of the larger ones, and they are now going from getting away from this system, and they're going into the free market, utilizing Adam Smith. Not exactly all of Adam Smith's, because there's still a lot of government control, but certain areas, look, we would, you read in the book, enterprise zones. So you have certain areas that they will develop. So if you look at China looking at their strictly communist, they're no longer strictly communist if we go into the different governmental economic systems. Okay, so that's the invisible hand. The next is resources, how to increase resources, new energy sources, new ways of growing food. All this makes a difference that I am more productive, more efficient. I minimize my waste, so now I can make more profitability with a smaller amount of input or capital going forward. All right. Now the Green Revolution, if you look at the Green Revolution, if I look at economics, it makes a big difference because now, before, if I was strictly as a business free market, the Adam Smith thing with the Adam Smith concept, free market, I'll do everything else to minimize my cost. So I'm not worried about safety. I'm not worried about, I'll just dump stuff out, or not worried about the environment. Businesses were like that, but that's where the government would say, hey, too much pollution, too much businesses, you're not being social responsible, which you're going to learn in the next couple of chapters when we, I think it's in chapter 4 or 5 when we go into ethics, they're going to talk about social responsibility. So the government has put in some boundaries, all right? So that, but now the boundaries are, from a business perspective, you have to be thinking green. That means recycling, make sure I don't waste, and make sure I replace. If I'm a lumber industry, every tree I cut, I have to plant other trees so the environment is re-stimulated. And I have to make sure that I don't cut that many trees that it affects the environment, or that I don't create products that pollute the environment. And you can see that a lot of changes are going now with the auto industry on that. So it's green. Now, if I look at the capitalistic, the 4 basic rights is own property, own business, right for freedom of competition, and right to freedom of choice. If you don't have this, the what do you call it? The capitalistic free market won't thrive. Okay? Now, President Roosevelt, he basically freedom of speech, he added 4 additional rights to this. Now, that's here for the United States. It doesn't have to necessarily mean, because China is using the capitalistic system model, but they may not have freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship in your way, freedom from want, or freedom from fear. They do, but they have a lot of government control. So they have some censors, some censorship in that thing, but they're changing, remember? Because once they get into the global and they have to do work within uh, on a global scale with other countries that are buying or selling products, they will put some restrictions. If you want to buy or you want to sell or work within here, then you have to loosen up a little bit on the human rights issue. Okay? All right, so that's the capitalistic. Now let's talk about the supply curve and the demand curve and the equilibrium. All this ties in. So when I'm looking at it from a supply curve is from a business perspective. How many products I will make depends how much. First of all, I got to pay off my initial investment or my cost to make the product and still make some profitability. So if the prices go up and I can make a profit. And if I raise the prices too high from my perspective, then I'll make more. Now on the demand side as a customer, the consumer, you, the consumer, as a customer, when the coffee prices go up, what happens is you're going to go, yeah, the coffee price is going up. I will substitute for tea because it's too high. So I, as a customer, will not pay high prices unless there's no alternative. But if there's an alternative, I'll go for the alternative. So what's going to happen between the business view and the consumer's view is the equilibrium price. If I look at the equilibrium prices, where how much a consumer is willing to pay and how much a business is willing to sell its product and still make a profit. So I could sell it at a lesser price, but sell more, or I could sell it less at a higher price, but still make profitability as long as the consumer and the business meet that equilibrium point. If I, as a business person, cannot make any profit, or and because of the low cost that the consumer wants, because my competitor is doing it, it gives me this signal to get out of the business or find new and creative ways to make me more competitive. Okay, so they call it the equilibrium price. When the two intersect, they either call it or market price. The author in this book utilizes it, interchanges it together. The degrees of competition, monopoly means if you look at monopoly, and there's very few monopolistic operations, even in the United States. You say, well, my electric company is a monopoly. No, that's really because you go cogeneration, you could use solar power, you could also buy from different electric companies. The reason you want a monopoly, would it make sense if I have 2 different electric companies and there's no any government regulations that I would have 2 sets of telephone poles or electrical poles? And if I had a third one, I had 4 sets. It makes sense just to have one, and you pay a fee to transfer your product, whether it's cable TV, internet, or power back and forth. So you do have a choice, but you still have to have someone to maintain it. So you're paying some kind of a service, like an expressway, a medium to get to your products to. Okay, so then pure competition is what we're talking to. And analog, there's few sellers like tobacco and automobiles. Monolithic is many sellers, perceived differences, bakeries and fast food. So if I have a lot of competitors, it keeps on driving the price down. If I'm the only competition, if I'm only business, I could charge what I want. I have no competition. Okay? So that's the degree of competition. Benefits, it allows for open competition. Companies, if I look at benefits of free market, a limitation, inequality of wealth, environmental damage, pushes towards socialism. And when we're kind of going like this more, if I look at when we go later on into different government economic systems that run different governments, you're going to find out that there's no pure. We're not purely, what do you call it, free market. We're not purely, or capitalistic. We're not purely communists. We're not purely socialists. And the only difference in the socialists is, I can still have the freedom and everything else to choose what I want. I just have to pay a higher tax. Remember, because when you're looking at the from a global, for a national resource, everything in that country, in the U.S., it belongs to all of us who live in the United States. And how do I share their resources among our constituents or among the citizens, which the government is supporting, and I'm paying my taxes for? Okay, so we have that. Now, if I look at socialism, reducing inequality, and how do they do it? It's still capitalistic, but here in the U.S., I think if you pay for your municipality tax, your federal tax, and everything else, we're talking about give or take, we're talking about what do you call it, 33%. In a socialist country like France and everything else, the way the author looked about, you may be paying 50 to 60% taxes. So so it's a different way of spreading the wealth. Benefits, equality, free education, free health, free child care, longer vacations, shorter weeks. Remember, there's nothing free in business. There's nothing free in any kind of economic system. The problem with the economic systems is you have to pay higher. So I get a free education, I get everything else. But now for every dollar I make as a business person in the socialist country, I have to give back to the government 60 or 70 cents. So what happens? I've got the knowledge, I've got the training, I will leave that country for more of a capitalistic country where I'm paying only a third taxes on that. And it's no different when you're looking at a business. Where I'm going to open up. Taxes in Barrington are a lot higher, or in Lake Forest, than it would be in Wheeling or Waukegan. And the rationale for that is because I have more businesses, I have more corporations, I have more ventures within that. The other ones are more of communities, residential type of operation. Okay? So now negatives, and then when you get to brain debt, that's what the brain debt is basically the policy that people are leaving the country. I mean, not brain debt, brain drain. It's taking the knowledge, excuse me on that, okay? Now, communist countries, if I look at the government controls everything else. Remember, when I'm looking at the equilibrium price, if I can't meet that equilibrium price, that's the way the businesses will, they can't compete anymore, and they just go bankrupt or go out of business. And that's how, that's my check and balance. Now, if I look at the communists, but the communist countries, they have mathematical formulas or logarithms that are basically say, here's what we need. But the issue with that is that it's tight. If I have to, it's like in this class. If I would say that everyone in this class will get a C, no matter how hard you work, because we're all a collective, it doesn't have any incentive. Why should I work harder? I'm just going to get the same C. I'm going to get the same ration. I'm going to get, because we're going to split it among everyone equally. So that limits your innovation. It limits your production. So when I'm looking at the communist parties, and when they're adapting more the capitalistic system, and they're adjusting more into the free market, and they have no choice. I mean, they still kind of control the currency a little bit, but they're out in the global market, and that's the rules of the game that they have to play. Okay, so what you're going to find out is the free market and command. I'm going to look at the command. The command basically, you're talking about communists and socialists, because the socialist government has a higher input, more input than in a purely capitalistic free market. And if you look at the United States, we're not. If I look at the mixed economies now, if I look by, there's very few pure communistic government structure. So there used to be two. It used to be North Korea and Cuba. And Cuba now, they can't sustain. They want to start bringing more enterprise. People want a little bit more. The ones who want to work hard should be able to get more money, or I mean, be able to retain more profitability. And that, remember, again, that goes back to the invisible hand. Remember, as long as I could keep some of my profit, I'll try to find new ways to make more profit, to make more money. But if I got to give it all to the government, because we're all collective, good idea, good concepts, but when we really look human nature across the world, human nature is what can I do better for my family and for myself, okay? So then in the next one, consumer price index, if you're looking at economic conditions, how do I know what inflation is? They look at 400 goods, and they do it every 6 months just to make sure how much inflation goes. Do the prices go up or the prices go down? And it just gives you some idea. You have national deficit. National debt is a big debate going on now, or going to national surplus. We haven't seen a national surplus in a long time. Now there's two policies you're going to have to look at. You have monetary policy, and we'll talk a little bit more. That's controlled by the Federal Reserve, and they control by interest rates and open markets. And you have the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is what happens once a year, and that is your taxes. So the government has two things: it's taxes or spending. The big issue that's going right now, we keep on raising the debt ceiling. It's like I keep on raising my MasterCard or charge credit limit, but eventually I got to pay this money back. So I'm paying more into interest. So if the economy cannot sustain itself if I'm paying more interest than I'm making. So unless I'm growing, right now I think the U.S. Is more like we're still 20%. We're still making 20% with all the debt and everything else. We're still growing. But if we stop growing, eventually our debt's going to catch up to us. And you can see that in Greece, and you can see that in other countries that are basically are struggling because they overspend. Because when you charge and go in advance, you're basically utilizing future abilities to earn money now, and you're going to pay it back later. So, but if you wait too long, so if you really look what happens, if you don't reduce the debt, if you don't take care of the spending, you're going to have to raise the taxes because you got to pay your interest. And if you're not productive, what's going to happen? You're going to go into default, okay? And then the monetary policy, Federal Reserve, and we'll talk about that in the last chapter. The Federal Reserve, when we go into the banking and everything else. But remember, the Federal Reserve is a check and balance. So the taxes and spending is the fiscal policies at the government. The Federal Reserve is a separate body that is to make sure that I don't print more money than I have the ability to, that the government allows me to. So there's a limit, because otherwise you just keep on printing, and what happens? The money's useless because I'm printing more money, but I'm not getting anything back. So when I'm looking at that, and how do I know? Because my inflation rate, and it's at the price index. So if you look at some countries, if you look at Japan, I think in your book, if you look at Japan for grapes or something else, or bananas or apples, they're paying like $10 for like 2 pounds of apple. That is really expensive, and for the average person to afford. So what are you going to do to change that? So you either reduce the spending or find new ways to bring income in. And not always taxes. You can't tax everyone, because after a while you're going to have you're going to fall back into the communist system that you're just working for big brother, for big sister. All right, that's about it for the economics. This is just this is just an overview. You're going to take this in this class here, Introduction to Business. Very few formulas, very few mathematical equation. I just want to get a general idea from a business perspective. Why is economics important to me? It's the utilization of natural resources. How do I spend it? How do I maintain it? How do I get more money? How do I increase my effectiveness and increase my profitabilities by reducing my input or my capital, by finding new and more creative ways to eliminate waste, and at the same time also to make sure that I am a socially responsible individual and not doing any kind of for lack of better words, hurting the environment. Okay, so my name is Dr. George Mochocki, and this is chapter, I'll put this right up here, chapter 2, Economics and Introduction to Business. Thank you very much. Bye.